Thank you, Madam Chair. And let me say to each of the witnesses here today, thank you for being here, thank you for your testimony, and thank you also for your service. I want to thank each of you and also each of the heroic law enforcement officers who demonstrated extraordinary courage in fighting to repel the terrorist attack that unfolded on the Capitol on January 6th. And we are grateful for the bravery and the courage in the face of a truly horrific attack. In the aftermath of that attack, there is naturally a process to assess what could have been done to better prevent that attack, to better secure the Capitol. And I think everyone recognizes that hindsight is different from a decision made in the moment facing the threat immediately, but this hearing is nonetheless productive for analyzing the security decisions and law enforcement decisions that were made real time and for learning from them what can be done differently to ensure that an attack like that never again occurs. Chief Sund, I want to focus on, with some detail, your written testimony and just walk through what occurred in the days preceding January 6th and then on January 6th. So in your written testimony, you say, on Monday, January 4th, I approached the two Sergeant-at-Arms to request the assistance of the National Guard, as you had no authority to do so. You go on to say, I first spoke with the House Sergeant-at-Arms to request the National Guard. Mr. Irving stated that he was concerned about the, quote, optics of having National Guard present and didn't feel the intelligence supported it. He referred me to the Senate Sergeant-at-Arms to get his thoughts on the request. I then spoke to Mr. Stenger and again requested the National Guard. Instead of approving the use of the National Guard, however, Mr. Stenger suggested I ask then how quickly we could get support if needed and to lean forward in case we had to request assistance on January 6th. Can you describe at a little more length those conversations with the two Sergeant-at-Arms on January 4th?
Absolutely, sir. The first conversation occurred Monday morning. I went over, I'd have to refer to my notes, but sometime maybe around 11 o'clock in the morning, I met with Mr. Irving in his office. That's where I made the first request for the National Guard. He had indicated, I don't know if I really like the optics. You know, I don't think the intelligence really supports it. He had, like we had said, recommended I talk to the Senate Sergeant-at-Arms. I went over and met with, later on the day, either, I'm trying to recall if it was in person or over the phone. I'd have to go back to my timeline, where I reached out to him, and they may have already talked, because he had referred me. He said, do you know somebody over at the D.C. National Guard? I said, yes, I do. I have a good friend over there, General William Walker. He said, can you give him a call and see if we needed assistance, how quickly could we get assistance and what type of assistance could he give us? So that evening, as I was driving home at about 6:35 at night, I went ahead and called General Walker and spoke to him and said, hey, General Walker, I don't have authority to request National Guard, but I want to find out if we needed them on Wednesday. How quickly could you get them for us, and is there a way you can kind of, be prepared just in case we put in the request? At that point, he had advised to me that he has 125 National Guardsmen who are supporting the COVID response in the District of Columbia. And if we needed a response, a quick response, he could, what he called, repurpose them and get them to the armory, at which point we could get somebody over to swear them in and try and get them to us as quick as possible. We ended our call. The next day, I met with I met with Mr. Stenger. He came over to the office for the 12 o'clock video call that I had hosted with the dozen of the law enforcement officials from the National Capital from D.C. We spoke about it briefly there and told him what William Walker had told me, as well as I'd passed on to Mr. Irving. I think later on that afternoon, they both seemed satisfied with that response.
So, Mr. Irving and Mr. Stenger, Mr. Irving, as I understand it, you have some disagreement with the characterization about the concern about the optics. So I would invite both Mr. Irving and Mr. Stenger to relay your best recollection of that conversation on January 4th.
Senator, my best recollection of the conversation on January 4th was a phone call from Chief Sund indicating that he had received an offer for 125 unarmed guard that could be positioned around traffic perimeter checkpoints at the Capitol. My recollection again is, as we followed up with Mr. Stenger, the three of us engaged in a conversation whereby we looked at the offer in light of the existing intelligence. And the decision, the collective decision amongst the three of us, was that the intelligence did not warrant the National Guard. And my recollection, that ended the discussion relative to the offer. And the only question on the table is, should we perform any follow-up? And Mr. Stenger recommended that we ask that they be placed on standby. And that was the end of the discussion.
So to the best of your recollection, did you make the comment about optics? And if so, what did you mean by that?
I cannot remember my exact verbiage. Had I used any language to the effect, it was all in reference to whether the intelligence was matched to the security plan.
And let me ask both Mr. Irving and Mr. Stenger, did you all have conversations with congressional leadership, either Democratic or Republican leadership, on this question of supplementing law enforcement presence, bringing in National Guard, either on January 4th or real time in January 6th?
On January 4th, no, I had no follow-up conversations. And it was not until the 6th that I alerted leadership that we might be making a request. And that was the end of the discussion.
Mr. Stenger?
For myself, it was January 6th that I mentioned it to Leader McConnell's staff.
So there's been some disagreement about what time phone calls occurred. I know Senator Portman asked earlier. Presumably everyone has phone records. I think it would be helpful if each of you could forward the relevant phone records to this committee. And Chief Sund, you also reference in your testimony that you sent an email to congressional leadership.
I have it.
If you could forward that to the committee as well, I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Ossoff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to our panel. Just want to take a moment and echo the sentiments of so many of my colleagues expressing appreciation for the men and women of the United States Capitol Police who endured a great deal on January 6th and showed great heroism. And also, Madam Chair, if I might express an interest in working with you to ensure that they're well taken care of and their needs are met. This discussion of the conversation that the three of you had regarding supplementary security support on January 6th raises the question of who's in charge. Is consensus between the two sergeants at arms and the chief of the U.S. Capitol Police required to make such a request? Mr. Sund?
The request for the National Guard needs to go to the Capitol Police Board for approval, yes.
Who has ultimate responsibility for the security of the U.S. Capitol complex? Which individual?
I believe that falls under the Capitol Police Board.
The Capitol Police Board. So there is no individual who has personal responsibility for the security of the U.S. Capitol complex?
That's the way I interpret it, yes.
Had the U.S. Capitol Police conducted exercises simulating comparable events such as a violent riot on or within the U.S. Capitol complex?
Part of our training for civil disobedience units involves dealing with riotous groups. So we do that training. We do training on people attempting to gain entry into the building. Officers are trained on how to handle if someone tries to come through your door unauthorized. But training for thousands of armed insurrectionists, they were coordinated and well equipped. No, we have not had that training before January 6th, but I'm sure we'll find a way to. I'm sure they'll find a way to do it now.
So, if I understand correctly, Mr. Sund, you're saying that personnel had engaged in tactical training regarding techniques to repel attempts to breach the complex regarding rules of engagement. But had any comprehensive exercises that included command, that included procedures for coordination with supporting agencies, that included requests for support, that included communications with the Department of Defense or White House officials or Guard units been conducted?
Yes, we have. We do exercises that are very similar to what you're talking about before some of our national special security events. Those are the NSSEs, such as the inauguration. We'll do tabletop exercises that go through the process of what you're talking about. Yes.
Thank you. And